second, and to talk about Yukon's working poor. So I'm going to introduce Colette first, Colette Atchison, because she didn't give me a bio, so she gets to do her own. Go ahead, Dee. I'll just move down the table.
You need the mic, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, can
Do
you
I?
use the microphone?
Yeah.
Or you could just use the, you have to turn it on though.
Yeah.
And it may be still set very loudly, so
Yeah, you have to bear with us. We just got this system installed yesterday
at 4 o'clock.
at 4 o'clock, and yeah, if it's at a volume more than 1, everybody's going to lose their eardrums.
We did try and adjust it, so maybe
Yeah.
it's good.
All right, so Colette Atchison, I'll let her do her own little bio in a second. Moving right along. Wrong order. Okay, now we're good. Christina Craig is the coordinator of Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition. Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition facilitates the elimination of poverty through awareness, action, and advocacy. Christina has been coordinating the work of the coalition for the past 8 years, focusing on the issues members bring to the table: housing, homelessness, food security, living wage, and income supports. And next to Christina is Stu Mackey. Stu Mackey is the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity in Yukon. Stu started volunteering with Habitat for Humanity Yukon when he was retired in 2009 and joined Yukon College's carpentry class that built the first Habitat Super Green triplex on Wheeler Street. Following this, he continued on as our Executive Director.
For the interpreter when you're reading?
Slow down. And next, we have Tristan Newsom. He's the Executive Director of the White Horse Food Bank. Started working at the food bank as a volunteer, and gradually, over the years, became more involved until he eventually became the Executive Director of the organization this year. Food bank inside, he knows the food bank inside and out, and has personal relationships with many of the food bank clients. So just before I pass the microphone over to Colette to introduce herself, this is something that, as an organization, the Yukon Employees Union is very supportive of. Not just, it's not just homeless people that are working poor. We have our members who are, you know, in the public eye, the golden pensions and highly paid that are having to access services as well. So this is not just about individuals that are what we would probably consider more the downtrodden in life, but it's a lot of people that are struggling with this. So, without further ado.
Thank you. So I'm Colette Atchison. I know lots of people here, so I probably don't need to go on and on. I've been in the Yukon for 3.5 years. I'm the Executive Director at the Yukon Association for Community Living, and we have lots of ideas and things to say about the working poor in Canada, so looking forward to the discussion today.
These table mics should do the job.
Okay, I'll just do a check-in. Is that okay for the volume at the back? Hi, again, my name is Stu Mackey. I'm with Habitat for Humanity. And I'm just going to do a very, very quick overview. I think most of you probably know our work. Habitat for Humanity mobilizes communities at home and abroad to provide families with true affordable home ownership as a pathway out of poverty. So we're kind of a long-term solution to break what often is we call the cycle of poverty or the food rent cycle. And the way we do that is that we partner and with almost everybody we can possibly find. And we sell our homes to our families at no profit, financed with no interest, no down payment mortgages. Just quickly, Habitat is a very big organization, started in the 70s in rural Georgia, an interfaith community, interracial community that decided they can work together to build homes for themselves to secure their families. Think about that. Rural Georgia, interfaith, interracial in the 70s. George Wallace was the governor. Just give you an idea. So it has grown since then. Habitat's very large in the States where it started. We also done over 2,800 homes in Canada. And our international programs have been very vibrant. More than 600,000 homes have been renovated or improved. 6.8 million people. And we're in over 100 countries right now. So it's become quite a worldwide phenomenon. This is the Yukon story, and I won't go through it in depth, but we're just now presently working on our 17th and 18th home. And to give you a better idea, they're all over the community. They're not in one particular area, but it's been an opportunity for families who cannot get conventional mortgages. In other words, they cannot approach a bank, or can they get the down payment required these days to be able to afford a home. So they're families that are stuck either in social housing, rent tied to income, which again is its own cycle of keeping people where they are, or they're in private rentals, and of course there's a real serious issue with housing costs, and I think all of us have experienced that over the last 5 years for certain. So our families, our selection criteria is quite straightforward. They must be in need of adequate housing. And what I mean by that is they're living in a situation where A, it might be too expensive for their family income. It may be unsafe. They may be overcrowding. There can be many reasons, but they need to have adequate housing. They also have to have a source of income, because we are going to sell the home to the family. And we're going to do this with very favorable financing, zero interest, no down payment. But the big part is, because there's no down payment, they need to work with us for 500 hours. That's called sweat equity. They have to put into their own home or to their community 500 hours. And they would have to have lived in the Yukon for a period of time. But this is where I really want to focus. Habitat Canada did a study comparing 300 families who come from the same social economic origin. And they compared a control group to 300 families who were able to get a Habitat home, and see what was the changes over time between the control group and the group that received Habitat for Humanity home. And there was significant improvements in the lives of the families that were able to stabilize their housing and stabilize their finances through the Habitat. Quality of employment improved. Many people didn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to keep ahead of the rent food cycle. 37% of the people that had Habitat homes came out of social housing. So they're building equity. They're no longer required to pay or to be provided with subsidized housing. They're now fully engaged in the economy of their community. But the big one for me was the bottom stat. 22% of the children who were in Habitat homes went on to post-secondary education, where only 8% of the kids in the control group identified that. That's really starting to change the parameters and starting to change how the next cycle of poverty can be broken. So these are just some of the areas that we work on, and we're very fortunate to have a number of people helping us. But I'll stop there, because I may be some discussion later. But this is really the key issue for us. Home ownership is the way we break the cycle, not necessarily immediately, but certainly for the next generation. Thank you.
All right.
I'll go. Shall I move the,
I'm just going to get rid of this.
All right.
I don't know.
or I can just.
So I wanted to tell you about a little bit about the Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition, but mostly about some of the work that we've done recently around a living wage calculation in Whitehorse. So the Anti-Poverty Coalition, for those of you who don't know, has been around for 20 years. This is our 20th year in operation. And it is a very grassroots organization that really began when some folks who many of you probably know, like Ross Finlater and Michael Doherty and Renee Alford, got together in response to a situation that a government of the day, when Willard Phelps was the Minister of Health, was out doing community consultations around health and cutting healthcare costs. He slipped in a little question right at the end about how, in his assessment, the Yukon could be cutting social assistance rates because people were basically flocking to the north because our rates were so high, and this was a rich place to come to if you were wanting to, I don't know, take advantage of the system. Anyway, a number of folks that I mentioned got together. They did a little bit of research. They found out very quickly that in fact the Yukon had the lowest social assistance rate based on the costs of living here, and in fact that what the minister should be talking about was actually increasing the rates so that people in the Yukon were on par with other Canadians. And that's how the coalition began. And since then, it has become a place where anyone who has an interest in social justice issues is welcome to come and talk about whatever it is that may be of concern to them in the community. And we have, over the years, therefore spawned a variety of projects and organizations who have worked on issues that largely affect low-income people. So the Downtown Urban Garden Society, for example, came out of the Anti-Poverty Coalition. This chapter of Habitat for Humanity came from members of the coalition like Todd Hardy and a number of others who saw that this organization could benefit Yukon low-income folks. The revitalization of the Mental Health Association came out of the coalition, and the Food Bank came out of the coalition. Sally and Sisters has come out of the coalition, White Horse Connects. There's a number of things that have been spawned by this approach of really just listening to one another, talking about the issues, and trying to figure out if there are solutions that we can come to as a community. One of the things that we have found over time is that everybody always wants to know the number. We want to know what the poverty line is. We want to know how many people are living in a particular way. We want to know how much food costs per month. We want to know the cost of poverty. We want data. And we're not very good at that in the north because we're small. We are often lumped together, with stats, with the census. The numbers that come out of the territory are too small to be able to use in a way that makes sense for us here. And we also always deal with issues around confidentiality in very small communities if you are reporting certain income levels or other issues. So what the coalition, because it is this beautiful community organization, when we were putting out some information around living wage campaigns, somebody in our mix stuck up his hand and said he would be happy to calculate the living wage for Whitehorse. And so he did. And so we last year, for the first time ever, have got some sense of numbers that are being used across the country to not suggest how many people are living below a certain amount of income, or how many people are using a food bank and that must be a reflection of poverty, but rather what it is that people need to make in any given community in order to, I don't even know if the word is thrive. It's more than survive, but it's not, taken off. It's basically to be. And so in Whitehorse, we have learned that a family of 4 would need to make $19.12 an hour with 2 parents working at that rate. And the way that the living wage is calculated is that it looks at income and benefits and deductions. So it's this crazy, interesting formula where it's not just saying if you made $19.12 an hour, you'd be fine here in Whitehorse. It is more an assessment of if you have if you have a family of 4 and so you're needing daycare and you need a vehicle, but it's not a brand new vehicle, You are gonna be obviously feeding your family, transporting them, perhaps buying a Christmas
Clothes.
gift.
Clothes, you
Clothes,
saying?
yep, yes, exactly. Childcare. That this is the amount that you would need to make to be, to survive. So it doesn't include, this amount doesn't include putting away any money for future. It doesn't include paying off your school debts. It doesn't include a new car. It's the basics. And so what this living wage calculation does is it is a great reflection for us now to be able to see how affordable it is to live in Whitehorse, and how affordable it is to live in Whitehorse compared to other cities across the country, because we have used a framework, a methodology that is consistent across the country. So our $19.12 is consistent with the, now I'm not even gonna be able to pull one out of my hat that's true, but you know, Thunder Bay's might be $17. I think Surrey's, I won't even say. I'm making it up. So, but the point is that, and what is happening across the country then, is that many communities are starting to run, or starting to put forward living wage campaigns. And they are recognizing employers who provide work at a living wage. And they're suggesting within communities that if an employer is providing a living wage, then we as consumers should be supporting those businesses. They're also sort of, so that is one movement that is going on across the country. Here in Whitehorse, I think the Anti-Poverty Coalition is not, we haven't taken that route yet. I think as a coalition, we haven't really had a discussion about whether that would be a positive way to approach this in the territory. What we have looked at though is recognizing that within this calculation it becomes very evident that inclusion and being able to thrive in a community and support your family is a reflection not only of how much money you make, but what benefits your government is providing, what benefits your employer is providing. And there are a variety of ways that you can have the gap between the living wage and minimum wage close. And that ultimately, I think as far as the coalition is concerned, that's the piece that we're most interested in. How do we ensure that people are healthy and secure in their work and in their income level so that they can thrive? And what we've found, and it was interesting when we did this particular work, it was right around when the federal government just introduced the National Child Benefit, the new National Child, what's it called, the Canada Child Benefit, which is an incredibly good piece of news. And what it did was, before that was put into our calculation, the living wage in Whitehorse would have been $20.25. with a family of four. When you inserted this new benefit from the feds, it went down of more than $1. So the impact of solid government policies that support low-income earners can be huge in ensuring that people can thrive here. And so I think it's sorry, that's my phone. And it'll stop in just a second. So, and it's interesting, as Deborah was saying today, and I don't know who else might have heard it on CBC, but there's been this work around, a community, regular old Canadian citizens getting together and talking and learning about pharmacare, basically, or how to ensure that people who need particular kinds of medicine can get it for cheaper and therefore have more money in their pocket. And so if you're a low income earner, that would be also another example of how you can reduce the cost of living in order to keep more money in people's pockets through a government program. And I think that it's just an important piece of a conversation that we as a community should start having around what some of those policies can be, besides assuming that if everyone is just making more money, then we'll all be better off. Because we also know that in a market like the housing market, there's a supply-demand thing. And prices go up if there is not a big enough supply, and so increasing wages in and of itself does not mean that your housing is going to be more affordable. And so we need to have, I think, these conversations that are a little more complex around how to ensure that all wage earners, and maybe not even wage earners, but all of us who live here, because we know that some people cannot work full-time, we know that some people may be living in crisis, some people may need income supports, and we still need to ensure that regardless of what that source of income is, that people are able to thrive. And that's what the work we've done on living wage.
Wow. Thank you, Stu. It's really, really tough to speak after Christina. So, because she's so good. So at Community Living, we were founded in 1964, and the language that we use around our mandate is that we support people with intellectual disabilities and their families. Now, I feel like, not just me in this job, but I think in our sector, we're constantly in catch-up mode because there's so much change that's happening around us. So just as an example, in 1964, the population of people with intellectual disabilities would have been quite easy to spot, predictable in terms of their capacity, and some fairly easily identified ways of supporting them according to the norms of the time. Now, in our current reality, we have the two conditions that are the highest numbers, the highest prevalence, and still under the general banner of intellectual disability, although the language has changed somewhat, are autism and FASD. And both of those are not always easy to spot. They're not predictable in terms of capacity, and the supports that are required can be very complex and multifaceted. So that's one thing that has sort of changed the landscape of our work quite a bit over the years. Another, so just in terms of numbers, because some of this continues to surprise me, the Fasd Stats, Wenda's sitting right there, so foolish to even think that I can quote something, but I've heard numbers anywhere from, in the Yukon, 17% of our overall population has been diagnosed or indicated as having some form of FASD. We have a really strong advocate in our community, Judy Bukosdi, who talks about a doctor who has noted that an average of 25 babies a year are born in the Yukon with some form of FASD, not necessarily diagnosed right at that moment, but they will come to that diagnosis over a lifetime. So those numbers are pretty high. We also just got back from a conference in Ottawa, and we heard CASDA, the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorder, talk about their reality that before the age of 8, 1 in 68 Canadian children will be diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. So our world is expanding all the time. In terms of the working poor and income and some of those things, I think there's a couple of things that specifically affect the reality for people with an intellectual disability or FASD or autism or whatever those different components that you bring to it. So one of the things that's a big issue right at the starting point is that sometimes people with an intellectual disability are not even considered as basically contributors to our society. So they're destined for a lifetime of under expectation in our school systems, very low expectations and very low resources and supports that are provided to them. And then in the adult world, they're sometimes destined for a lifetime on social assistance with no expectation that they're going to be creators and contributors in a work life as the rest of us should be. And so those things are issues right out of the starting gate that affect many people. But then even once people do find their way into work, we have a really strong employment program, and Challenge is another community partner that has a strong employment program. But I think there's some pretty serious disincentives to people stretching themselves and challenging themselves to become strong contributors in the workforce. And that's due to some of the ratio and the formulas that are used to calculate the balance between earned income and a social assistance payment that a person would receive. So why would any of us go to work if our financial life was better by us staying home on the couch? And so I think we've got some work to do in that area to come to a recognition, first of all, of people with all types of disabilities and intellectual disabilities as contributors to society. But then second, about how we design systems that allow people to work to their full capacity, and in doing so, to actually move the needle of their quality of life up a bit, rather than just trading one kind of poverty for the same kind of poverty in a different way. Thank you.
Hello everyone. So for those of you who don't know, the food bank really began operations in 2009. The notion of the food bank began a little earlier in 2007, but we started distributing food in 2009. Since our inception and since that operation, we've served 6,500 unique individuals. So when you consider the population of Whitehorse being something like 30,000, I don't know what it is specifically, that's a pretty big portion of us that have had to use and access our services at some point. So again, that's 6,500. So some people access the food bank obviously more than just once in their lifetime. The average client that we have accesses our services between 4 and 6 times a year. So since 2009, people have accessed the food bank almost 100,000 times. So it's a huge number, the amount of times that people have actually had to come to us for help. Our service is an emergency food service. So what that means is we provide food for whatever size your family for 3 to 4 days. And that includes all your essentials. We have many non-perishables, obviously, but also many perishables. So with the help of local grocery store chains like White's and Superstore, we're able to give out frozen meat, pork, beef, chicken, things like that, which is great. We also purchase eggs, milk, fruit for school children, as well as many other toiletries and essentials like toilet paper, garbage bags, tea, sugar, flour, so people can bake, that sort of thing. Yeah, so people can access our services about once a month. Unfortunately, that's all we're able to afford. And we usually end up distributing almost 1,500 people a month, which is a huge financial burden. But I mean, the community here in Whitehorse, it always surprises me how awesome everyone is. We just had a huge fundraiser that took place at White's, and the Rush put it on for us, and they raised $11,000. They were selling those little stuffed animals that I think everyone probably saw. So that was really cool. And fortunately, December is a great month for us. Donations just skyrocket to the organization during this next few weeks. The only problem is we are then forced to kind of stretch those donations over the rest of the year because our numbers don't go down in the summer, right? Because all of a sudden you have a bunch of school children who are no longer accessing those lunch programs. Now they're home, right? So now, before, when you didn't have to feed your 3 kids all day, you do for June and August. So our numbers actually, especially for families, slightly increased during those summer months. So that's always been a continuous struggle for us, is kind of trying to figure out how we sustain ourselves into those troublesome months. But so far, with the help of the community, we've been able to do it. It's been pretty great in that regard. And we're starting to kind of expand our organization into a sort of a hub, which is pretty cool. We just had the new garden that's being built next to our building. So that was funded through the federal government, so big thanks to them. So the idea there is that it's a community effort where there's about 20 beds, there's a greenhouse, there's a shed. So all the food that is grown there, organic hopefully, will be given to the food bank and distributed. The purpose of the project is community development. We would never be able to grow as much food as we need to distribute to the amount of people we access. I purchase 500 pounds of produce a week, so we'd never be able to grow that in 20 garden beds. But the idea is community engagement, try to get people thinking about the food bank, thinking about local produce and agriculture, because that's also really important to the message, is kind of trying to localize our food here in the north, rather than just shipping it up from the south. And also now just this weekend coming up, we have the potluck co-op. They're going to be distributing out of our building, so it's kind of starting to develop into this really cool hub. And Anti-Poverty Coalition has Sallying Sisters that also operate out of us. And our new tenants in the building are the Boys and Girls Club. So it's becoming kind of a cool building, a cool project, and it's I'm really excited to see where we go from here. Thanks.
I guess we could just leave it open. If anybody got some comments or questions they may have.
I do. Tristan, I have a question directed at you. My name is Gerard. I have an idea too. Why not for food stores, whatever the families who have children and they're struggling to provide for their family? Would there be an option to have 10% off of the food stores that they could donate in that way for families who are in need, so they're not so dependent if they only get limited to once a month? The food bank, could they have partnerships with the grocery stores in town to get a discount on their groceries?
Yeah, interesting question. So the grocery stores in town, they donate to us considerable amount of product already. In terms of just a flat out discount, I'm sure that would be something that their corporate head offices would have to decide on some level. But in terms of the local managers, they've been really cooperative with us. They do what they can. If they have a discount, like their store is already doing a discount, they'll kind of stretch it, and I can go in and order, a few $1,000 of oatmeal if I have to, which is really great with them. Obviously, when you see the little yellow sticker in the aisle, that's only supposed to be like maximum of 6. They'll sell me 500. So I think they do what they can.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I'm interested, there's been a lot of talk recently about guaranteed income. And I know that it was looked at once here. There was a report done by social services. Is anybody talking about that again up here? We're a small population, and this might be a great place to look at something like that, the guaranteed income.
Well, so I guess it was maybe in 2010 when Hugh Siegel was here as part of the development of the social inclusion and poverty reduction strategy that the government at the time was developing. And he, for those of you who don't know, as a conservative senator, he was a very unusual champion for something like a basic annual income. And just so people understand the